I'm Emily Rooney. Welcome to this special edition of Greater Boston, The Outlaw and the Lawman, the final chapter. For more than 17 years, we've been following the saga of James Whitey Bulger, his bloody trail of murder and corruption, and his mysterious 16 years on the lam. Tonight, we recap those years of coverage with interviews from disgraced FBI agent John Connolly to Bulger consorts and his victims. And, of course, the final chapter itself, the trial. Boston in the 1960s. It was all-out gang warfare. The battle was over turf, control and protection of local businesses, loan sharking, gambling, the growing drug market. But mostly it was retaliation, an eye for an eye, as gangsters flipped allegiances, turned informant, or simply ratted each other out. By the mid-1970s, law enforcement had had enough. Their target, La Cosa Nostra, led in Boston by Gennaro Angiulo and his 4 brothers. It took almost 10 years to bring them down.
Yesterday, a federal grand jury sitting at Boston returned a 20-count indictment charging 7 individuals, including Gennaro Angiulo, Victoria Nicolo Angiulo, consisting of multiple acts of murder, illegal gambling businesses, illegal loan sharking businesses. The defendants were arrested last
That
evening.
was September 1983. Bill Weld was U.S. attorney, and his organized crime task force had struck gold. But it was a long time coming. And as we now know, nailing the Angiulos meant giving the Winter Hill Gang, namely James Whitey Bulger and Stephen the Rifleman Flemmi, a free ride. The 2 gangsters had become informants for the FBI, working with agent John Connolly and his boss, John Morris, to wipe out Boston's Italian mafia.
Tell me what kinds of information Whitey Bulger and Stevie the Rifleman Flemmi were able to provide to you that was so valuable to the FBI that the FBI was willing to turn their heads on some of the crimes that they were doing?
Well, the FBI really didn't turn their heads. Flemmi filed an affidavit in which he said that he was allowed to do anything but murder.
Which meant gambling, drugs?
No, anything but murder means
well, I'm
cars,
trying to be specific.
Yes,
yeah.
Gambling, drugs, bank robberies. That was far too broad. That was not the agreement.
Are you saying that's untrue?
I don't agree with Flemmi's assertion that he had the right to do anything but murder. They had the right to conduct a gambling and a loan sharking business and collect rent from bookmakers with no violence. And that decision was made by Jeremiah T. O'Sullivan, the head of the strike force. It was, Larry Saha testified to that in court. That's the exact message that he was given.
What kinds of information were they able to bring to the FBI that was so valuable, as I said before, that they were willing to allow them to continue a loan sharking operation? Like what did they bring in?
Well, these were 2 highly placed assets of the Bureau. And you have to remember why they became assets of the Bureau.
Which was that you wanted to bring down the Italian
we
mafia.
wanted to bring down the Italian mafia. I mean, the mafia was the #1 investigative priority of the FBI. And as such, Bulger and Flemmi were not on our investigative radar screens. They were, however, at a sufficiently high level in their own organization to be able to laterally affect the mafia.
Were they so well plugged in to the Angiulo family, the Patriarca family, that they were able to get information on those people and bring it to the FBI that eventually led to their indictments?
Well, absolutely. They were long-term sources of the FBI.
The other thing is that one of the great curiosities in all of this, and I know you're from South Boston, we want to know what the relationship was, if any, with Billy Bulger, how closely connected he was with his brother, whether
Bulger.
he knew that his brother was an FBI informant. Did he know that?
The simple answer is he knew nothing about it, and his brother wanted it that way. That was at his decision. when we first had the relationship, the business relationship.
You don't think he ever told them?
I don't think he ever told them.
Were you close to the former Senate president at the time?
I've always been a friend of his and remain so to this day.
You were
for the mafia.
ever aware of a case where there was a murder committed by Whitey Bulger or Steve Fleming? Wasn't it your obligation as a law enforcement officer? It would be my obligation.
Were
you ever aware of any?
No, I never. I mean, these guys were sources of mine. They're not going to sit down and tell me. From the very beginning, it's understood.
Did you ever ask them if they killed anybody?
Well, why would I do that? He was a source. I mean, the top echelon criminal informant program, the reason that a lot of these, they're having difficulty with this right now is it's in conflict with the Attorney General guidelines. It doesn't make any sense. And that's one thing that has emerged from these hearings. The top echelon criminal informant program was geared towards developing top echelon mobsters, primarily mafia members, who by definition have all killed at least once. The bottom line is our mission was to take out a mafia family, and we accomplished it. Mm-hmm. We took out 42 members and associate members, all of whom I would guess have killed at least 5 people, directly or indirectly. So you're talking about people who have killed maybe 200 people, and we took them out, using a gang of 2.
With FBI agent John Connolly's protection, Whitey Bulger and his associates enjoyed free rein over South Boston. In 1980, Bulger was looking for a new front for his criminal enterprise. That's when he forcibly took over a liquor store run by Julie and Stephen Rakes. And when they complained to the FBI, John Connolly told Whitey. 12 years ago, Julie told us the story. Their store, Stippo's, had only been open for a week. Julie, pregnant with their 3rd child, was alone at the store. Stephen was home with their 2 other young children when Whitey Bulger, Stephen Fleming, and associate Kevin Weeks came knocking.
So these 3 guys knocked on your home door. They came in, and what did they say to Stephen Rakes?
They came into the kitchen and sat at the kitchen table and proposed a deal. The first deal was that he was going to be partners with us in the liquor store because apparently some people had come to Whitey to put together a contract to kill my husband because supposedly the liquor store was a bad thing. And so Whitey came with a proposal to say that he'll be partners instead of killing him. So when my husband called me and said, we're going to have a partner, and of course, I'm safe and sound at the store, not knowing what was going on, was diligent, and we have no partners. Saying, no, we're not partners with anyone, especially not him. Why would we be partners with him? And he says, I'll call you back.
When Stephen Rakes called Julie back that night, there was a new deal. Bulger, Fleming, and Weeks were now the proprietors of Stippo's. Whitey handed Stephen Rakes $67,000 in cash. There was no negotiating.
And did Bulger and Fleming leave any doubt in your mind, in Stephen's mind, that if you didn't go along with the deal, what would it mean for you?
When Whitey and Fleming and Weeksy sat at my kitchen table, my youngest daughter was only 13 months at the time, teething, waddled, crawled over, and Whitey Bulger put her up on his lap and allowed my daughter to teeth on the barrel of a gun. And of course the conversation, whatever was going on, stopped and everyone observed that, and Whitey just went, it'd be too bad you won't see her grow up. So the picture was really clear that we would die, my children would die, there was going to be no mercy.
And no mercy there was. Bulger, Fleming, and Weeks immediately moved into the store, changing its name to the South Boston Liquor Mart, running their illegal businesses from the back room.
So once this had happened, I mean, you're terrified, you're outraged at the same time. What did you do? Who did you tell?
We went to my uncle, who was a police detective, to see if there was anything that could be done. And my uncle ironically said, "Oh, I just happen to know an FBI agent who just moved back into South Boston, and I'll go and talk to him." And as it was, he went to John Connolly, the FBI agent, and told him our story. And my uncle came back with a message from John Connolly that said, unless we were willing to wear a wire, there's nothing he could do for us.
Wearing a wire was out of the question. 3 days later, Whitey Bulger summoned Stephen Rakes to the liquor store. Waving a pistol in his face, Bulger said, "Back off. We know you've gone to the FBI."
20 years ago, my life was changed. Now, I want people to know what happened, and I want justice. I want to be repaid for what was taken away from me. Not only was our lives threatened, but our livelihood was taken. Our whole being was threatened. We were lucky to survive it, and I think we should get back what was ours.
I came into a circle when I was 18 years old. I was working as a bouncer. And it wasn't like this happened overnight. It was a progression over the years that I became deeper and deeper involved in crime. And then when I was involved with the murder, double homicide with Brian Howell and Michael Donahue, I knew then my life was over and my life had changed for good.
But you continued.
At that point, you really had no choice. I mean, I had been involved in serious crime with them. I had been involved with murder with them. And then basically, there was no walking away at that point.
You told Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes, and you say in your book that you were, an accomplice to murder. But did you ever murder? Were you right there? Did you pull triggers? Did you stab? Did you help pull teeth out? Did you?
No. I've been involved in fights where people got hurt, and a fellow tried to stab me one time, and I did shoot him. But as far as the murder is concerned, no.
Well, why should anybody believe that? That you didn't actually commit the murders?
Well, it's been proven. I mean, Steve Fleming pled out to the 10 murders, and he corroborated who actually did the killing and stuff.
But you knew exactly where the bodies were buried?
Correct.
Why did you know that?
I helped to bury them.
So you were there for the actual burials. Did you witness the murders?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How did you come to cooperate with the FBI, or the federal government, I should say, regarding John Connolly? Did they approach you? Did you say, I know more, I can say what his involvement was with this? How did that happen?
When I reached an agreement with the DEA and the state police on the investigation, the Justice Department came into it. And one fellow that had already been indicted had already talked about John Connolly, and they came to me. And part of my plea agreement was to be truthful and honest about it, everything that I had done. And so John Connolly's name came up, and I told him what I knew about John Connolly.
You had such a normal upbringing. There was always food on the table. Your father and your mother had arthritis, but your father was a hard worker. You have 5 successful brothers and sisters, not younger. Some of them went to Harvard. How did you get into this track when the others went on another?
Well, my mother had arthritis, severe arthritis. My father had a heart attack, and I started working instead of going to school. My brother got me into Commonwealth Prep the following year, and based on that, I would go to Harvard. They're like legacies, but it wasn't for me. I was just out of school too long. I really wasn't interested in, and so I started working bouncing, and that's how I came in the circle of these people, and I got involved.
Whitey Bulger had long-term romances with two South Boston women, Teresa Stanley and Catherine Gregg, who went on the lam with him in 1995. But there were other women in Whitey's life, including Lindsay Sear. Lindsay met Whitey in the mid-1960s while she was working as a waitress, and he was working at a nearby construction job. They began dating, and soon after, Lindsay Sear gave birth to Whitey's only known child. How many years had you been dating by the time you had the child?
About a year and a half. And until our relationship became serious, and then he said to me, we really have to talk. And I said, okay, fine. He said, your choice is Pier 4 or Jimmy's Harborside. So I took Jimmy's Harborside, and we went to dinner, and he sat down and began to tell me the story of his life. And I was shocked. But
what did he tell you?
He told me that he had robbed banks years before, that he had spent a year on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, and that he'd done 9.5 years of a 20-year life bit, and that he'd been in Alcatraz, and that he never intended to go back to jail again.
Did he tell you he was clean at the time?
I don't think that was part of the discussion, but he was still working.
Listening.
He was still working in construction, so I assumed he was. And I assumed when he said he'd never go back to jail that he wasn't doing anything that would put him there.
Now, all right, so how did he react when you told him you were pregnant?
I've always said Jimmy can do silent better than anyone in the world except my stepfather. He was totally silent, and he looked at me and he said, it's too dangerous. And I, at the time, was all of 21. He was 16 years older than I. And I said to him, I'm sure I'll be fine. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, I've got to think about this. And I mean, to me, at the point where someone says you're pregnant, you're done. Yeah. There's not much to think about. But he said, I'll get back to you. And so he took me home, and he called me the next day, and he said, we have to seriously talk. He said, this is dangerous. It's dangerous for you, it's dangerous for the baby, and it's very dangerous for me. So he sat down and he explained to me that he was not working construction anymore. And because I was working every day, I had no idea what he did. He lived with his mother.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And he said, this is too dangerous.
Because he feared that the child would be targeted in some way.
Exactly.
That
he
you
said,
and the
you
child
make me
would be
vulnerable. There are 4 people I will turn up on a street corner for. You, that child, my mother, and Billy. Yeah. And that was too much danger.
Did he want you to have an abortion?
No, that was never anything he suggested. I told him I didn't believe it. I didn't believe in abortion. I believed it should be available, but I certainly
But so when he was
do
telling you it was too dangerous, what did he want you to do? Get out of Dodge?
No. I think it was such a shock to him that I think he was kind of dumbstruck, if you will. And he was trying to figure out, and I think it was the worst possible scenario for him.
In June of 2011, the FBI came up with a new tactic aimed at finding Bulger and his longtime girlfriend, Catherine Gregg. The FBI released this public service announcement focusing on Gregg and her habits.
This is an announcement by the FBI. Have you seen this woman? The FBI is offering $100,000 for tips leading to Catherine Gregg's whereabouts. These photos are from the early 1990s. Gregg has had plastic surgeries. She is wanted for harboring James Whitey Bulger.
2 days later, James Whitey Bulger and Catherine Gregg were caught in Santa Monica, California. Anna Björnsdottir, living in Iceland, saw the public service announcement on CNN and called the FBI, saying her former neighbors, going by the names of Charles and Carol Gasco, looked a lot like the people she saw on TV. The day after the arrest, one of Whitey Bulger's former henchmen joined us. John Red Shea was just 16 when he came under the mobster's influence. Red Shea, you actually knew the guy. You knew him well. You worked with him. You actually ended up doing 12 years in jail, too. Tell us your story. How'd you know him?
Well, I grew up in South Boston, and I met him when I was a young age of 16. And he told me the story about growing up with a family member of mine who he used to rob trucks with from the projects. And it was an aura to, of him that he held, that you looked at him and it was, you respected, in some cases, kids like me, a young guy like me in the neighborhood respected and wanted to be like. And eventually, I was introduced through associates of his at a young age, and eventually I surpassed those associates and became a boss in the organization. And I ran the drug entity of that.
Were you ever involved in any of the murders?
I was not.
You can't say it if you were, can you?
Well, let's put it this way. I wasn't.
What do you feel he did to you? I mean, I know you ended up doing
time.
Well,
I mean, he knew everything that was going on with me through his sources at the FBI, John Connolly. He knew that. He knew exactly what was going on through that the DEA was, they were the targets. They were called on that. They were called, the FBI was called by the DEA telling them, we are targeting these guys and for the narcotics distribution. And so he knew all that. He was well tipped, and he let you take the fall. He was tipped off saying, hey, be careful where you speak. This is wired, that's wired, this phone's tapped. And then he had to devise a plan to take some of that heat off of him. And who better than the young guy on his way up, who's in that business, who's trying to become somebody even, more bigger in that, climb up the ladder. Who better than the young guy, the youngest guy of all? And a young guy who was very, wanted to prove himself. There was no one better than that for him. It was a perfect opportunity.
Shortly before the trial began in June, we were joined by Stephen Rakes, the man whose liquor store was stolen by Bulger, Weeks, and Flemmy. At the time, Rakes was looking forward to testifying.
I am prepared. I have been told I will be called as a witness.
And did they give you any parameters whatsoever?
To show up on June 10th.
Just to show up. Are you looking forward to having an opportunity to look Whitey Bulger in the eye?
I am. Very anxious to do that. Making me sick sometimes.
Do you think Whitey Bulger himself will take the stand?
Oh, I think he will. And he'll tell on everyone.
What will he say?
He'll make up stories if need be. He can tell on everybody. What's better than the truth? A whopper of a lie.
He's claiming he had immunity from the federal government, from the FBI. Think that's possible?
There's no chance that ever happened. Not a chance.
Well, he certainly had their protection.
He certainly had something.
Immunity is another issue.
That's right. Pretty sad when they're protecting the criminals more than they are the citizens.
Then a twist of events. Just one day after Rakes was told he would not be called to testify, his body was found in a Lincoln Park. A business associate has been charged with his poisoning death, unrelated to the Bulger case. The witness list was a who's who of one-time gangsters, law enforcement officials who had waited decades for this day, a disgraced FBI supervisor, and, of course, families of Bulger's victims.
Being the rattiest.
The trial naturally attracted the media, those who have spent decades documenting Bulger's long crime spree and his 16 years on the lam.
I'm the one he really hates.
Of all the trial witnesses, though, it was one of the prosecution's first to take the stand who was the most compelling. Confessed murderer John Martirano, a Bulger cohort who nonchalantly described a decades-long killing spree. Adam Riley recounts his testimony.
Sporting a dark blue suit with a bright blue handkerchief tucked in the pocket, confessed mass murderer John Martirano looked dapper in court today. he described a dizzying array of murders, including one sequence in which he kept killing the wrong people before finally getting his target. During his testimony, Martirano sounded almost bored, saying blandly of his victims, "Blood went everywhere. I shot him in the heart," and "he wasn't a reputable guy." That stoicism sent a chill through the son of one alleged Bulger victim.
He's the real deal. He's a killer. It doesn't faze him one bit. He talks about shooting people like it's absolutely nothing.
Early on, defense attorney J.W. Carney offered this tantalizing promise, saying his client would take the stand in his own defense.
We are going to ask our client on the stand about everything. We have no secrets.
But it was not to be. 41 days and dozens of witnesses later, Whitey Bulger remained mum. In fact, one of the few times Bulger's voice was audibly heard in court was when he and his former associate, Kevin Weeks, exchanged expletives, as we reenacted for broadcast.
You won against the system.
What did I win? What did I win?
You won 5 years.
5 people are dead. 5 people are dead.
Does that bother you at all?
Yeah, it bothers me.
How does it bother you?
Because we killed people that were rats. And I had the 2 biggest rats right next to me. F*** you, okay?
F*** you, too.
What do you want to do?
Hey, Mr. Bulger. Mr. Bulger, let your attorney speak for you. Mr. Weeks, here's how this works. You answer the questions, okay? Mr. Carney, you can finish your questioning.
In the end, James Whitey Bulger was convicted of 31 of 32 criminal counts and found guilty in the deaths of 11 of the 19 people he was accused of murdering, leaving the families of some victims bitterly disappointed.
The government needs to be responsible. They need to be accountable for all this crap. We are here because of the United States government. The deceit of the FBI is the reason why we are in this place right now.
It's doubtful the FBI will ever offer more information about its relationship with the Bulger criminal enterprise. Bulger was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms plus 5 years, and as of today is in a federal transitional facility in Oklahoma. Bulger has vowed to appeal, but in all likelihood, the 84-year-old gangster will die in prison. I'm Emily Rooney. Thanks for watching.